Have you ever dealt with someone who always had to win? Not just win, but dominate, control, manipulate. Someone who could smile while stepping on your dignity and still feel like they were the victim. You might know this kind of person all too well. The narcissist. They thrive on chaos. They feed off your reactions. And they believe deep down that they're untouchable. But what if I told you that the real victory, the kind that leaves them truly stunned, doesn't come from fighting back? It doesn't come from yelling louder, exposing their lies, or proving them wrong in front of everyone. It comes in silence, in strength, in your ability to rise without making noise. See, narcissists assume they always have the upper hand. They believe they can hurt you, leave you broken, and walk away without consequences. They count on your emotional reaction. Think of a time when someone deeply hurt you. Maybe they betrayed your trust, dismissed your worth, or tried to make you feel like you were the problem. What was your first instinct? To confront them, to make them understand the pain they caused. That's normal. That's human. But the Stoics, who lived centuries ago and yet understood human behavior better than most therapists today, taught us this vital truth. You cannot control others, only yourself. You can't force a narcissist to see your value, but you can become so grounded in your own value that their opinion becomes irrelevant. That's the quiet victory. It's not about applause. It's not about revenge fantasies. It's about peace. Imagine this. You're no longer checking their social media. You're no longer replaying old arguments in your head. You're no longer trying to win by showing them what they lost. Because now, you're focused on building, on living, on becoming the kind of person who doesn't just survive toxic people, but transcends them. And let me be clear, this is not weakness. It's not avoidance. It's power. Because when the narcissist finally realizes that you're not chasing them, not seeking validation, not falling apart, they feel something they can't process. Insignificance. You've taken away their oxygen, and they're left gasping for control they no longer have. This is why we start here. Before we go deeper into what happens when the narcissist realizes you've won, before we unpack their unraveling, their confusion, their desperate attempts to reclaim your attention, we have to begin with this truth. Victory starts with you, not with them, not with proving anything to the world, but with a decision to stop handing over your power, a decision to become emotionally sovereign, a decision to control the only thing you were ever meant to control, yourself. So if you've ever asked yourself, how do I finally move on? How do I make peace with someone who never gave me closure? How do I win when everything they did was meant to break me? This video is for you, because the answer isn't out there, it's within you. And once you understand that, once you fully embrace the power of detachment, of self-control, of quiet evolution, you'll realize something profound. You didn't just survive them, you grew because of them. They were not a curse. They were the fire that forged your steel. And when they look at you one day, calm, successful, untouchable, they'll see what true victory looks like. And it won't look anything like revenge. It will look like peace. Are you ready to reclaim your peace? To turn pain into power and silence into strength? Then let's begin. Part 1. The shift in power. Let's talk about the moment everything starts to change. Not for the narcissist, but for you. Because whether you've been dealing with a manipulator, a gaslighter, or someone who constantly seeks to control the narrative of your life, there comes a point where the power dynamic begins to shift. But it doesn't shift because they suddenly change. It shifts because you do. You see, narcissists operate on a very predictable fuel source. They thrive on 3 things: control, validation, emotional reactions. If they can control your emotions, they feel powerful. If they can get a reaction, even a negative one, it reassures them that they still matter to you. And if they can manipulate you into doubting your own worth, they win, at least in their mind. But what happens when you cut off the supply? What happens when you stop playing the game? Let me give you an example. Imagine the narcissist sends you one of those classic provocation texts. You know the type, passive-aggressive, condescending, designed to trigger you. Maybe they say something like, "Wow, I guess you're still as selfish as ever." In the past, you might have jumped to defend yourself. You might have written a 3-paragraph reply, desperate to explain that you're not what they say you are. You might have lost sleep over it. But now, you look at the message, and you delete it. No reply, no defense, no emotional spike, just silence. And in that silence, something profound happens. You reclaim your power. Because the moment you stop giving them emotional leverage, the balance of power begins to shift. They can no longer pull your strings. They can no longer dictate your mental state. And to someone who has always thrived on controlling you, that's terrifying. Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This is where the Stoic mindset becomes your armor. You're no longer reacting impulsively. You're no longer letting external chaos disrupt your internal peace. You're beginning to master the only battlefield that truly matters, your own mind. Now, this might sound simple, but let's be honest, it's not easy. Because when someone's been embedded in your emotional system for years, when their words have shaped your self-perception, when you've been conditioned to defend, explain, and seek their approval, letting go feels like withdrawal. It feels like you're cutting off a part of your identity. But in truth, what you're cutting off is the illusion. The illusion that you needed their validation to be whole. And once that illusion breaks, so does their power. Let's go even deeper here. There's a concept in Stoicism called apatheia. It doesn't mean apathy in the modern sense, but rather a deep freedom from unhealthy passions. In practice, it looks like this. You see the narcissist trying to bait you, and you don't take the bait. You recognize their insults as projections, and you no longer take them personally. You hear the lies they tell about you, and you don't chase after everyone trying to set the record straight. Why? Because you've outgrown the need to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. And that, my friend, is the shift they never saw coming. Because narcissists aren't just addicted to attention, they're addicted to predictability. They want to know which buttons to push. They want to know that you'll react, that you'll cry, that you'll rage, that you'll try one more time to make peace with someone who has no intention of giving it. So when you stop, when you detach, when you choose silence over reaction, peace over proving, and dignity over drama, you become unpredictable. And in their world, unpredictable means uncontrollable. This is where the true shift in power occurs. It's not about dominating them. It's not about getting the last word. It's about no longer needing the conversation at all, because you've risen above the cycle. Think about it. How many hours, days, even years have you lost trying to make things make sense with someone who constantly changed the rules? How many times have you bent over backwards trying to keep the peace with someone who only thrives in conflict? There's a quiet strength in realizing you don't owe anyone continued access to your peace. You don't owe anyone a reaction simply because they demand one. You don't owe anyone the right to define your reality. That's the Stoic path. That's the shift. It's not flashy. It's not dramatic. But it is liberating. And make no mistake, when the narcissist senses this shift, they will notice. They may escalate at first. They may double down, try harder, act bolder. Why? Because they're losing control, and they know it. But hold the line, because every time you stay grounded, every time you respond with calm detachment, every time you walk away from the trap, instead of stepping into it, you're not just winning a battle, you're transforming the entire war. You are no longer playing to survive, you're playing to evolve. So I ask you this, where in your life are you still handing away your power? What emotional reactions are still being controlled by someone who doesn't deserve to hold that influence? And what would it feel like to finally reclaim that power, silently and completely? The shift starts with one decision, to stop reacting and start rising. And when you do, they will feel it. But more importantly, you will feel it. You'll feel the freedom, the clarity, the peace that comes when your energy is no longer dictated by someone else's dysfunction. That's real power. That's the beginning of your victory. In the next section, we'll explore what happens inside the narcissist's mind when they realize the power they once held is gone. Stay with me. Part 2. Their initial confusion. It usually starts with a question, not from you, but from them. A silent, confused question in their mind. Why isn't this working anymore? The tactics that used to pull you back don't. The guilt trips that once had you apologizing, useless. The sudden cold shoulder, the breadcrumb messages, the passive-aggressive silence. Now, all of it falls flat. And that's when they start to panic, though they'll never admit it. They won't say, "I'm losing control." They'll say, "You've changed." Or worse, "You're being cold. You used to care." But you know what's really happening. They're confused, because the old emotional levers no longer move you. This is the second unmistakable sign you've already won. They begin to notice their power fading, and like anyone addicted to control, they don't go quiet. They double down. Suddenly your phone lights up with 10 messages in a row, all after you've ignored them for weeks. First it's warm, then aggressive, then apologetic, then accusatory. One minute they miss you. The next, they're angry. Then they go silent again, hoping you'll chase. Sound familiar? It's not about love. It's about losing their grip. You've broken the pattern they've come to rely on, and that shakes them to the core. See, when you were under their influence, your reactions were predictable. You'd reply right away. You'd explain yourself. You'd fall into the emotional loop, fight, make up, confusion, repeat. But now, you pause, you breathe, you choose not to respond. You no longer reward their chaos with your attention. And that silence, that steady, grounded non-reaction, it terrifies them. Not because they care about your peace, but because they can't penetrate it anymore. This is when you'll start to notice odd behavior from them. Messages that come at strange hours. Mood swings. Sweet one moment, sarcastic the next. Random, just checking in texts that seem innocent, but are loaded with emotional bait. It's not a coincidence. They're throwing darts in the dark, hoping one lands, because in their world, if they can still make you flinch, they still matter. But in your world, they're just noise. And here's where the Stoic mindset becomes your shield. Epictetus once said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." Translation, they can only hook you if you still carry the wound. But your silence now isn't just absence. It's evidence. Evidence that you're healing, that the wounds they once exploited have closed, that the chaos they thrived in no longer lives inside you. Let me be clear. Their confusion isn't a sign that you're being cruel. It's a sign that you're no longer available for manipulation. And that's a healthy thing. So when they flood you with texts, when they suddenly act like they miss the old you, when they poke at your emotions, hoping to resurrect the past, don't second-guess your growth. Recognize it for what it is. Proof. Proof that your boundary is working. Proof that your emotional detachment is real. Proof that your silence speaks louder than any reply ever could. Now here's the hard truth. They may not give up easily. They'll search for cracks. They'll look for the you they used to control, and if they find even a flicker of that old dynamic, they'll pounce. But the beauty is, you've evolved. You no longer explain yourself to someone who doesn't listen. You no longer internalize their shifting moods as your fault. You no longer believe that their confusion is your responsibility to resolve, because it's not. Their confusion is the natural result of you changing the rules of the game. You've stopped playing, and they're still tossing the ball, hoping you'll catch it, but you've walked off the field. And that, my friend, is a power move. You don't have to fight them. You don't have to outsmart them. You just have to stop feeding them. The Stoics didn't teach resistance through aggression. They taught mastery through self-discipline. You don't win by controlling others. You win by controlling yourself. So the next time they lash out, or pretend to care, or try to trigger old emotional reactions, ask yourself, is this about love or control? Is this connection or confusion? Do I need to engage, or is my peace more valuable than their approval? If your answer leans toward peace, then trust it. That discomfort they feel, that confusion they express, it's not your burden to fix. It's the weight of their own fading power. And the fact that you're not flinching anymore, that's how you know you've already won. Part 3. Panic and desperation. If silence makes them confused, your growth makes them panic. See, the narcissist doesn't fear being alone. They fear being irrelevant, especially to someone they once controlled. And when your detachment becomes undeniable, when their texts go unanswered, when your boundaries hold firm, when your peace no longer breaks under their pressure, that's when panic sets in. And with panic comes their favorite tools: love bombing, guilt tripping, manufactured drama. It's the final stage of their emotional chess game. And if you're not prepared, it's easy to mistake this desperation for sincerity. They might suddenly message you with words you've been waiting to hear. I realize now how much I hurt you. I've been going to therapy. No one has ever meant as much to me as you. Or they'll flip the script, play the victim. I'm struggling. I need you. I don't know who else to turn to. Sometimes it's framed as an emergency. I just had a breakdown. Please talk to me. But look closely. Is it real remorse? Or a performance designed to re-hook your empathy? Because here's the pattern. The moment they feel your emotional distance, they go into survival mode. Not to repair the damage, but to regain control. And control is the only language they know how to speak fluently. It's not about love, it's about influence. They want back in, not because they miss you, but because they miss having access to your attention. Let's break this down. You've probably experienced a version of this. After months of silence, they suddenly pop up with an apology so articulate, it feels handwritten by a therapist. They say all the right things. They acknowledge the pain. They use emotional phrases like, "I've grown. I see what I did. Let's talk like mature adults." For a second, it feels hopeful. It feels like maybe, just maybe, they've changed. But then you notice the shift. You ask for time, and they don't respect it. You don't reply, and the sweet words turn sharp. You try to keep the boundary, and suddenly you're the selfish one again, because the apology was never about your healing. It was bait. And if that doesn't work, they escalate. Out of nowhere, they create chaos. They post cryptic stories online. They reach out to your friends. They start spreading subtle rumors. They paint themselves as the misunderstood hero and you as the cold, unreasonable one. It's a last-ditch effort to destabilize your center, because if they can't control how you feel about them, they'll try to control how others see you, or worse, how you see yourself. But here's where your strength becomes unshakable. You don't flinch. You don't explain. You don't go back. Because by now, you've learned the difference between a real apology and a well-packaged manipulation. The Stoics taught us this. Truth doesn't need drama to stand. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't oscillate between guilt and praise. Real change is consistent, calm, accountable. It doesn't pressure you. It doesn't corner you. It doesn't manufacture urgency and call it love. So if they're trying to rush your decision, if they're using emotion as a weapon, not a bridge, that's not reconciliation. That's desperation. And here's the most important truth I can give you today. Desperation is not devotion. Desperation is about their loss, not your value. You were valuable before they noticed. You are valuable now. You'll be valuable long after their panic fades into silence again. Their chaos is not your invitation to re-enter the storm. It's your confirmation that your boundary worked. So what do you do in these moments? You remember who you are. You breathe. You slow down. You observe instead of absorb. You ask, do their actions match their words? Is this about my healing or their comfort? Am I being seen or manipulated? If your peace is being compromised, if your gut tightens at the thought of responding, that's your answer. Walk away, not with drama, not with anger, but with sovereignty. Because this isn't about proving anything. It's not about teaching them a lesson. It's about protecting the version of you that fought so hard to heal. You've worked too hard to rebuild your inner world. Don't let panic disguised as love tear it down. Let them spin. Let them wonder. Let them face the reality of a door they once walked through without knocking. Now firmly, quietly, closed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So let your thoughts be calm. Let your boundaries be firm. Let your progress be sacred. Because panic is loud, desperation is chaotic, but your power is quiet, and it doesn't respond to noise. Part 4. The Smear Campaign. You ignored the texts. You didn't react to the guilt trips. You saw through the love bombing. You held the line, and now they're furious. Not because you wronged them, but because you didn't fall for the script. So what happens next? They try to destroy the stage you walked away from. Welcome to the Smear Campaign. This is the narcissist's last resort. When reconnection fails, they shift the focus from pulling you back to pulling you down. If they can't control your reality, they'll try to rewrite it. They'll twist facts. They'll invent stories. They'll play the victim, and they'll make sure mutual friends hear every version but yours. At first, it might come subtly. She just changed. He ghosted me out of nowhere. I really tried, but they were just too unstable, too emotional, too selfish. Then it escalates. Accusations, lies, gossip whispered through carefully chosen people, the ones who still trust them. Or worse, trust both of you. And let's be honest, it hurts. Not just because they're lying, but because you know they're doing it on purpose. Not to heal, not to reflect, but to punish you for breaking the cycle. And that's exactly what this is. Punishment disguised as storytelling. It's not truth. It's retaliation. Because in their world, if they can't be seen as the hero of the story, they'll settle for being the victim. And the fastest way to play the victim is to paint you as the villain. So how do you respond? The Stoics have an answer so clear, so radical, and so freeing. You don't. You don't chase down every rumor. You don't correct every lie. You don't gather receipts and declare war. You stand firm in your character. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." In other words, let your life speak louder than their words. Because a smear campaign only works on those who are already invested in the narcissist's version of you. And those people, they were never in your corner to begin with. You see, the truth has a secret weapon: time. Time reveals who was lying. Time reveals who's consistent. Time reveals who builds and who breaks. So if you've been painted as cold, cruel, heartless, ungrateful, let the paint dry. You don't need to scrub the walls. You just need to live with integrity long enough that people see the cracks in their canvas. Let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone whose reputation seemed squeaky clean until time revealed their true face? Exactly. That's what's happening here. The narcissist wants to control the narrative because they lost control of you. It's not about justice. It's not even about honesty. It's about revenge, dressed in the disguise of a concerned story. And here's the paradox. The more they talk about you, the more they expose themselves, because people eventually notice. They notice how often the narcissist plays the victim. They notice how their stories always shift blame. They notice how you said nothing. And that silence, that restraint, that's your power. That's the Stoic approach. You don't defend yourself in every room you're not in. You don't water every fire they light. You protect your energy. You guard your peace. And you live in a way that makes the lies fall apart without you lifting a finger. Now, I won't pretend it's easy. It's frustrating to know people may be judging you unfairly. It's heartbreaking when mutual friends pull away. It's infuriating to watch someone spin lies while you hold your tongue. But ask yourself this: what does it cost you to constantly defend yourself? Your time, your peace, your dignity, and more importantly, what does it prove? If someone believes a lie about you without asking for your side, they were never seeking truth. They were seeking confirmation, usually of their own bias. And that's not your responsibility to fix. Let them believe what they need to believe. Let them talk. Let them spin. While you build, while you heal, while you live so well that the contrast between their narrative and your reality becomes undeniable. The Stoics remind us again and again: we are not disturbed by events, but by our judgments about them. The smear campaign isn't your downfall, unless you allow it to be. You can choose to see it as a threat, or as a mirror that reflects just how far you've come. Because when someone needs to destroy your name in order to protect their ego, that's not power, that's panic. And you're no longer living in that panic. You're no longer part of the performance. You've walked off the stage and into the sunlight. Let them stay in the shadows. Let them tell their version. The people meant for you, the ones who truly know your heart, they'll see the truth. And everyone else, they were never your audience anyway. Part 5. Attempting to replace you. Let's talk about one of the most confusing and at times painful parts of walking away from a narcissist. You finally step back, you cut the emotional cord, you choose peace over chaos, and just when you start to breathe again, they suddenly move on. A new partner appears, almost overnight. Romantic photos flood their social media, grand declarations, inside jokes, smiles that seem just a little too curated, and all of it public, loud, intentional, almost performative. And if you're honest, it stings a little, doesn't it? Even though you know who they are, even though you know how it felt behind closed doors, even though you're healing. You wonder, did they actually change? Were they just waiting to replace me? Was I the problem all along? But pause with me for a moment, because here's what's really happening. This isn't love, this is strategy. See, a narcissist doesn't seek connection, they seek supply, attention, validation, emotional fuel. And when you cut off that supply, they scramble to find another source, that new partner, that instant soulmate, that sudden romance. It's not about love, it's about optics. It's about appearing in control. It's about proving to you, to themselves, and to their audience that they're fine, thriving, wanted. And most of all, it's about provoking you. They want you to question your worth. They want you to feel left behind. They want you to think, maybe they're treating this person better than they treated me. But here's the truth you won't see in those curated posts. They're not building a new relationship. They're building a mirror. A mirror meant to reflect your insecurities back at you, because they know the break wasn't on their terms. They know you didn't chase. They know you chose peace. And that's something they can't control. So instead of looking inward and asking, why did they leave? They reach outward and try to prove, look, someone else stayed. But deep down, they know it's not real. Because here's what the Stoics teach us. No one can truly replace a person of depth. What they can do is substitute, temporarily, superficially, conveniently. But replacement implies equivalence. And when you've loved deeply, given honestly, and walked away with integrity, there is no equivalent. The new person isn't better or worse, they're just next. And sadly, they don't even realize they're being used, not as a partner, but as a prop, a tool, a photo opportunity, an emotional placeholder. Meanwhile, the narcissist still watches you. They check your stories. They ask about you through mutual friends. They try to gauge your reaction, measuring their self-worth by your silence or your jealousy. And when you don't react, that's when the cracks begin to show, because you're no longer giving them the emotional feedback they crave. You've stepped out of the competition. You're no longer playing the game. And that, not the breakup, not even the silence, is what truly threatens them. Because your healing exposes their performance. Your growth makes their attention-seeking look small. Your peace makes their chaos look obvious. Your detachment makes their desperation unmistakable. So what should you do? You don't compare. You don't analyze. You don't waste time wondering whether their new relationship is real. Instead, you ground yourself in what's true. That healing isn't a race. That relationships built on image crumble in time. That people who rush to move on are often trying to outrun themselves. The Stoics taught that jealousy is a reflection of misplaced values. We suffer when we desire things that don't serve our peace. And what could be more draining than coveting someone else's illusion? Remember, you're not on the outside of something special. You're on the outside of something destructive. You're not being replaced. You're being released. Released from the cycle of manipulation. Released from the performance. Released from the need to be chosen by someone who never knew how to value you. And now, you get to choose yourself. You get to pour your energy into things that grow, into people who don't just post about love, but practice it, into friendships that nourish, into goals that excite, into stillness that heals. And while they chase attention, applause, and artificial intimacy, you chase nothing. You receive. Because love that's real doesn't demand your suffering to prove itself. And peace that's real doesn't need to be posted. So when they flaunt their new chapter, let them. Let them broadcast it. Let them script it. Let them perform it. Meanwhile, you live, not loudly, but deeply, not for show, but for truth, not to be seen, but to see yourself again. And one day, Long after the filters fade and the novelty wears off, they'll remember something they didn't post about. The version of you that didn't need to be replaced. The version of you they couldn't control. The version of you who walked away and never looked back. That's not bitterness. That's clarity. That's not revenge. That's evolution. And that is how you win. Part 6. Realization of defeat. There's a moment when they finally realize it's over. Not because you said it, not because you made a dramatic announcement, but because they can feel it. You don't flinch when they message you. You don't play the emotional tug-of-war anymore. You're no longer angry, or heartbroken, or waiting for an apology. You've gone still. You've gone silent. You've gone sovereign. And that, right there, is when they realize they've lost you. Not just your body, not just your presence, but your mind, your energy, your emotional attention, the currency they once thrived on. And let me be clear, for a narcissist, that realization hits harder than any insult or confrontation ever could. Because control wasn't just their tactic, it was their identity. And now that identity is cracking. At first, they may still test you, a random hope you're well, a silent view of your stories, a third party asking about you. But when none of it works, when your indifference holds, when you show no trace of reaction or longing, that's when it sinks in. They can't reach you anymore. Not emotionally, not energetically, not even through provocation. And that's when their entire strategy collapses. You see, a narcissist doesn't process loss like most people. They don't grieve the relationship. They grieve the control, the supply, the constant reassurance that they mattered. And now, they're met with silence, stoic silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of self-respect, full of healing, full of clarity. And that silence breaks them, because it forces them to face something they've avoided their entire lives, that they were never in control of you. They were only controlling your reaction. Now that reaction is gone, and all they're left with is themselves. And trust me, that's the one person they've been trying to avoid all along. So how do they respond? Some withdraw completely. They go quiet, not out of peace, but out of discomfort. They avoid you because seeing your strength reminds them of their failure. Some grow resentful. They won't lash out directly, but you'll feel the tension. You'll sense the bitterness behind the silence. You'll hear the subtle slander through mutual contacts. Others just vanish because there's nothing left to extract. And narcissists don't invest in people. They invest in supply. But here's the most powerful part. None of that touches you anymore because you're not waiting for them to realize anything. You're not hoping they finally get it. You're not needing them to understand your worth. You've moved beyond the need for recognition from someone who once misused your light. And that, my friend, is what the Stoics would call true mastery. Marcus Aurelius said, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." You've done that. You've stopped looking outward for closure and turned inward for clarity. You've stopped needing revenge, reaction, or righteousness. You've chosen self-command. And while they're quietly unraveling from the loss of your emotional fuel, you're growing. You're not just healed, you're free. Because the ultimate defeat for a narcissist is not being screamed at, exposed, or replaced. It's being irrelevant. It's being unable to spark even a flicker of emotion in the person they once controlled. It's realizing that the game is over, and that you're not coming back to play. Let's be honest, there might still be moments where they try to reappear, moments where they test the waters, but the tone will be different now. Less bold, less manipulative, more cautious, even awkward. Because deep down, they know the door they once walked through with ease is now closed. Not locked in anger, not slammed shut in bitterness, just closed quietly, firmly, finally. And that kind of closure, that's not something they can destroy or spin or steal, because it wasn't given to you by them. It was chosen by you, for you. So if you're noticing that they've gone silent, that they've stopped reaching out, that the drama has died down, don't misread that as peace. It's not peace. It's powerlessness. It's the slow realization that the version of you who once tolerated the chaos no longer exists. And what's replaced them is someone solid, someone grounded, someone who no longer lives in reaction. That's not just healing, that's evolution. So breathe that in. Let it sink deep into your bones. You don't need to do anything dramatic to win. You don't need to get even. You don't need to prove a point. Because you already did. By walking away. By staying away. By thriving away. And their silence now, it speaks volumes. It's not closure, it's confirmation. Confirmation that you were never too much. You were never too emotional. You were never the problem. You were simply the one who woke up first. And now you're free. Truly, deeply, undeniably free. Part 7. Your quiet victory. Sometimes, victory doesn't look like fireworks. It doesn't come with a grand moment of justice. It doesn't announce itself in a dramatic showdown. Sometimes, victory is quiet. It's not them apologizing. It's not them realizing what they lost. It's not them chasing you to make things right. It's you, not needing any of that anymore. It's the moment you open your eyes in the morning and feel peace instead of tension. It's the way you walk into your own life, steady, grounded, free. It's looking back and no longer feeling rage, confusion, or longing. Not because you've forgotten, but because you've healed. And that right there is your quiet victory. You didn't win by shouting louder. You didn't win by exposing them. You didn't win by retaliating or proving anything. You won by reclaiming yourself, your energy, your mind, your time, your emotions. You pulled it all back from someone who tried to make your world orbit around theirs. And now, you're the center again. You're creating, you're connecting, you're breathing deeply. You're no longer emotionally chained to someone else's dysfunction. And here's the part they'll never understand. You don't want revenge. You don't want to make them feel what they made you feel. You're not planning some final, "I told you so." You're not watching from a distance, hoping they collapse. Because when you're truly free, you're not watching them at all. You've moved your focus entirely. And your life? It's thriving. Maybe it's not flashy. Maybe it's not on display for the world to see. But it's real. You're showing up to work with clarity. You're investing in friendships that feel mutual. You're rebuilding your health, mentally, physically, emotionally. You're rediscovering what joy feels like without needing someone else's approval. That's not just healing. That's power. The Stoics taught that the highest form of strength is self-mastery. That real freedom is found not in defeating others, but in no longer being controlled by them. And Marcus Aurelius put it perfectly. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Let that sink in. Your victory is not in reflecting their cruelty. It's in becoming unreachable to it. You don't respond to manipulation anymore. You don't fall for the same old emotional bait. You don't let their opinion shape your worth. That's a level of peace they can't understand because they've never known it. And that's okay. You're no longer living for them to understand you. You're no longer trying to be heard by someone who was never listening. You're no longer looking back, because what's ahead, that's where the magic is. You're building something that doesn't need to be proven. You're living in a way that feels aligned, honest, and whole. And the people who matter now, they see the real you. not the version of you that had to shrink. Not the one who walked on eggshells, not the one who questioned everything just to maintain peace, but the real you, rooted, clear, whole. And guess what? You didn't get here by accident. You got here by choosing healing when revenge was easier, by choosing silence when drama was tempting, by choosing yourself when guilt tried to pull you back. And that's victory. The kind of victory that doesn't need a round of applause. The kind of victory that whispers instead of screams. The kind of victory that says, I don't need closure. I created peace. So if they're still watching, still trying to provoke, still spinning stories, let them. Because the difference now, they no longer have access, not to your emotions, not to your energy, not to your story. They're a chapter you've closed, gracefully, powerfully, without revenge. And while they may never understand how you rose, you'll never forget what it took. The nights you cried and kept going. The boundaries you set and held. The silence you chose. The inner battles you fought and won. This is your quiet victory, and no one can take that from you. So live. Laugh fully. Love wisely. Create boldly. Speak softly. Or not at all. Because your peace is the proof. Your joy is the justice. Your growth is the goodbye. You're free now. Truly. So here we are. If you've made it this far in your journey, through the emotional detachment, the manipulation, the silence, the smear campaigns, the mind games, and you still stand tall with your peace intact, let me tell you something they never expected. You already won. Not because you destroyed them. Not because you got the last word. Not because you exposed them to the world. But because you refused to be destroyed, even when they tried to erase you quietly. That's a victory they'll never admit. But deep down, they know it. And when that realization hits them, it doesn't show up in one dramatic moment. It unfolds in phases. First, they're confused. They don't understand why you're no longer reacting. Then comes panic. They start reaching, poking, love-bombing, trying to reel you back in. When that doesn't work, they retaliate. Smear campaigns, lies, character assassination. And when even that fails, silence. Not peaceful silence, resentful silence. The silence of someone who knows they no longer have access to you. Not physically, not emotionally, not energetically. They withdraw, not because they're healed, but because they've finally realized you're out of reach. You are no longer the version of yourself they once manipulated. You no longer respond to chaos. You no longer need closure, validation, or revenge. And that, my friend, is the kind of strength that doesn't just protect you. It transforms you. See, this was never just about the narcissist. It was about you, and who you had to become to break the cycle. It was about reclaiming your mind from confusion, your voice from suppression, your peace from the emotional tug-of-war. This entire journey has shaped you into someone they never truly expected you to become. Someone unaffected. Someone who chooses boundaries instead of begging. Someone who walks away quietly instead of staying to be heard. Someone who no longer gives emotional oxygen to people who suffocate your spirit. And while they sit in their silence trying to figure out what went wrong, you're living, you're rising, healing, laughing, loving on your own terms, thriving, not to make them jealous, but because you've returned to your truth. And that's the legacy of this entire experience. Not pain, but power. Not bitterness, but boundaries. Not revenge, but growth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Reject your sense of injury, and the injury itself disappears." That's not denial, it's transcendence. It means the moment you stop seeing yourself as damaged, you start seeing yourself as reborn. The truth is, they thought your silence meant weakness. But your silence was strategy, was strength, was sovereignty. And now, they've run out of ways to reach you. Not because you built a wall, but because you finally realized you are enough, without their approval, without their apology, without their acknowledgement. They are no longer the center of your narrative. In fact, they're no longer in the story at all. And here's what they can never take from you: your ability to choose peace over provocation, your decision to heal in silence without performance, your refusal to mirror their toxicity just to feel seen, your rising success, joy, and freedom done without needing their validation. This is the legacy of your quiet revenge: peace, self-control, dignity, and growth that doesn't look back. So if you ever find yourself wondering, did I really win? Look around. Are you free? Are you calm? Are you no longer obsessing over how they feel about you? Then yes, you didn't just win. You became untouchable, not in arrogance, but in awareness, not in pride, but in presence. This is your quiet victory, and it's louder than any argument, more powerful than any apology, and more final than any form of revenge could ever be. You don't need them to see it. You feel it, and that's enough. If this message spoke to your soul, take a moment for yourself. Drop a comment below and share. What was your turning point? When did you first realize you were free? And if you're walking this path of healing, of sovereignty, of inner strength, you're not alone. Subscribe for more Stoic wisdom, emotional resilience, and powerful reminders that your peace is your greatest power. This isn't the end of your story. This is the beginning of the life you build without them. And trust me, it's going to be beautiful.